It was one of those perfect summer afternoons when the world seemed to slow down just enough to let people enjoy life. In the heart of the city, a sprawling park stretched out like an oasis amidst towering buildings and busy streets. Trees swayed gently in the breeze, their leaves casting dappled shadows on the ground below. Birds chirped softly, and laughter from children playing nearby filled the air. It was the kind of place where everyone could find a little peace, no matter how chaotic. Their lives might be. Maya Johnson had come to the park that day seeking exactly that, a moment of quiet reflection. She carried a paperback novel tucked under her arm as she walked along the winding paths until she found a bench beneath a large oak tree. The spot was ideal, shaded, serene, and just far enough away from the louder parts of the park. With a contented sigh, she settled onto the bench, placing her bag beside her. Opening the book, she allowed herself to get lost in its pages, savoring the simple pleasure of reading on such a beautiful day. Maya looked every bit the picture of calm confidence. Her dark hair was pulled back into a loose bun, and she wore a light summer dress that fluttered slightly in the breeze. Sunglasses perched atop her head kept the glare of the sun at bay. There was something about her demeanor that suggested she belonged here, in this space, unbothered by anything or anyone around her. And for a while, it stayed that way. People passed by, joggers, dog walkers, families pushing strollers, but no one paid her any mind. She blended seamlessly into the diverse tapestry of park-goer life. But then, without warning, the tranquility shattered. Two figures approached her, their presence immediately noticeable against the otherwise peaceful backdrop. They were police officers, both men wearing uniforms that made them stand out sharply among the casual attire of the crowd. One was tall and broad-shouldered, his face set in a permanent scowl. The other was shorter, wiry, with sharp eyes that darted around, suspiciously. Their names were Officer Ryan and Officer Clark, though Maya wouldn't know that until later. For now, all she saw were two strangers walking straight toward her with purpose. "Excuse me," the taller one said gruffly, stopping just a few feet away from the bench. His tone wasn't friendly. It wasn't even neutral. It was accusatory, as if he'd already decided what kind of person she was before saying a single word. Maya lowered her book slowly, tilting her head up to look at him. "Yes," she replied, her voice calm but firm. She didn't rise from the bench, nor did she appear flustered. If anything, she seemed mildly curious about why these two officers were addressing her. "You're loitering," the second officer chimed in, crossing his arms over his chest. His gaze swept over her dismissively, lingering on her book and then her bag as if searching for evidence of wrongdoing. "Loitering?" Maya repeated, raising an eyebrow. "I'm sitting on a public bench in a public park. How is that loitering?" The taller officer stepped closer, looming over her. "We'll decide what's loitering and what isn't," he snapped. "Now can I see some ID?" Maya felt her stomach tighten, but she kept her expression composed. This wasn't the first time she'd been treated unfairly because of the color of her skin, though it never failed to sting. Still, she refused to let them see her frustration. Instead, she leaned back slightly, resting her hands on the edge of the bench. "I'm not required to show you my ID unless you have reasonable suspicion that I've done something wrong," she said evenly. "And so far all I've done is read a book." Her response clearly irritated them. The shorter officer shifted uncomfortably, glancing at his partner as if expecting him to take charge. The taller one, however, only grew more aggressive. "Don't give us attitude," he barked. "You're causing a disturbance and we're telling you to move along." "A disturbance?" Maya echoed incredulously. "I haven't said or done anything to bother anyone. You're the ones making a scene." By now, a small group of bystanders had begun to gather. Some had paused mid-stride, curious about the commotion. Others stood at a distance, watching silently. Among them was a middle-aged woman holding a cup of coffee, her brow furrowed in concern. Nearby, a young man with headphones around his neck pulled out his phone, discreetly recording the exchange. No one intervened, not yet, but their presence added weight to the situation, turning what might have been a private altercation into something much more public. Officer Ryan noticed the growing audience and bristled. He turned to address the EO. Crowd, his voice rising. Everything's fine here, folks, just move along, nothing to see. But instead of dispersing, more people stopped to watch. Someone muttered something under their breath, too low for the officers to hear, but loud, enough for Maya to catch. She didn't react, keeping her focus squarely on the men in front of her. "You need to leave," Officer Clark insisted, pointing toward the path behind her. "Right now." "And if I don't?" Maya asked, her tone icy. She wasn't trying to provoke them, but she also wasn't going to be bullied into compliance. Not today. The taller officer reached for his handcuffs, snapping them open with an audible click. "Then we'll arrest you," he said, his voice dripping with menace. "Obstruction of justice, resisting arrest. Take your pick." For a brief moment, fear flickered across Maya's face, but only for a moment. Then it was gone, replaced by steely determination. She knew she hadn't done anything wrong, and she wasn't about to let these men intimidate her into believing otherwise. Slowly, deliberately, she rose from the bench, holding her book in one hand and her bag in the other. "Fine," she said coolly. "Arrest me. But know this. You're going to regret it." Her words hung in the air, sharp and clear. For a split second, the officers hesitated, unsure how to respond. And that's when it happened. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Heads turned, whispers erupted, and suddenly all eyes were on Maya. Someone had recognized her. Someone had realized who she really was. Within seconds, the murmurs spread like wildfire. "That's her. That's Michelle Dawson's daughter." The name hit like a thunderclap. Everyone knew who Michelle Dawson was. The mayor's family was practically synonymous with the city itself. Even the officers froze, their faces paling as the realization dawned on them. They weren't dealing with just anyone. They were dealing with someone who had power, influence, and connections they couldn't possibly comprehend. Maya didn't say a word. She simply stood there, meeting their stunned gazes with a look of quiet triumph. The tables had turned, and she knew it. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain. This incident would not be forgotten anytime soon. As the officers scrambled to figure out their next move, the crowd continued to grow. Phones were raised, cameras clicked, and videos streamed live to social media platforms. What had started as a quiet afternoon in the park had spiraled into something far bigger and far more consequential than anyone could have anticipated. The video of what happened in the park spread across social media faster than anyone could have imagined. Within hours, it was everywhere, shared, reshared, and commented on by thousands of people. Clips of the incident played repeatedly on local news channels, accompanied by headlines that grew more dramatic with each passing hour. "Racist cops target black woman in park," one read. Another declared, "Mayor's daughter harassed by police." The story quickly became national news, sparking outrage and debate across the country. For Maya Johnson, the aftermath felt surreal. As she sat alone in her apartment later that evening, she scrolled through her phone, watching the footage herself. It wasn't just the original recording anymore. There were edits, captions, memes, even hashtags like "Justice for Maya" trending online. Some posts praised her composure during the confrontation, while others criticized the officer's behavior in harsh terms. People she'd never met were calling her brave, fearless, and inspiring. But as much as she appreciated the support, part of her wished none of this had happened in the first place. Her father, Mayor Richard Dawson, was having an equally difficult time processing everything. When he first saw the video, he felt a wave of emotions crash over him: anger, guilt, shame. How could this happen in his own city, under his watch? He prided himself on being a leader who championed equality and justice, yet here was proof that systemic racism still thrived within the very institutions he oversaw. It was a bitter pill to swallow. That night, he called Maya and asked her to come home. They hadn't spoken since the incident, and though she agreed to meet him, she didn't know what to expect. When she arrived at the house, she found him, pacing in the living room, his face lined with worry. He stopped when he saw her exhaling deeply before pulling her into a tight hug. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I can't believe this happened to you. To my own daughter." Maya pulled away gently, studying his face. She could see how much this weighed on him, but she also knew apologies weren't enough. "Dad, I appreciate that," she replied softly. "But saying sorry doesn't change anything. What are you going to do about it?" Her question hung in the air, heavy and unyielding. Richard sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "I've already spoken to the police chief," he explained. "Both officers involved have been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. But I know that's not enough, is it?" "No, it's not," Maya said firmly. She walked over to the couch and sat down, setting her bag beside her. "This isn't just about me. This happens to Black people every single day. You know that. If you really want to make things right, you need to address the bigger problem, the system that lets things like this happen in the first place." Richard nodded slowly, sinking into a chair across from her. "You're right," he admitted. "And I promise you, I'm going to do everything I can to fix it. But this won't be easy. There are people who don't want change. They'll fight me every step of the way." Maya leaned forward, her dark eyes locking onto his. "Then let them fight," she said. "Because if you back down now, it'll mean nothing. All your promises, all your speeches about equality, they'll just be empty words." The conversation continued late into the night, father and daughter hashing out ideas and strategies. By the time they finally went to bed, Richard had resolved to take bold action. He would call a press conference the next morning to address the public directly. More importantly, he vowed to push for real reforms within the police department, reforms that went beyond superficial changes and tackled the root causes of discrimination. Meanwhile, officers Ryan and Clark found themselves at the center of a storm. News of their suspension spread quickly among their colleagues, dividing the precinct. Some officers rallied around them, claiming they were being unfairly targeted because of political pressure. Others kept quiet, unwilling to speak out either way. A few, however, privately expressed disgust over what had happened, recognizing the ugly truth behind the incident. One such officer was Detective Laura Bennett. She'd been with the force for over a decade and had seen her fair share of questionable behavior from fellow officers. But this was different. Watching the video made her stomach churn. She couldn't help but think about her own teenage son who was biracial. What if something like this happened to him someday? Laura decided to reach out to Internal Affairs, offering to share information she'd gathered over the years about similar incidents involving Ryan and Clark. Though nervous about potential backlash, she knew staying silent wasn't an option. "If we don't hold ourselves accountable," she told a trusted colleague, "then who will?" As the investigation began, tensions within the department reached a boiling point. Anonymous messages circulated among officers, some defending Ryan and Clark, others condemning them. Meanwhile, outside the station, protesters gathered daily, demanding justice and accountability, signs reading "Black Lives Matter" and "No Justice, No Peace" dotted the sidewalks, while chants echoed through the streets. Reporters camped out near the building, eager for updates on the case. Back at home, Maya struggled to adjust to her newfound visibility. Strangers approached, her in public, thanking her for standing up to the officers or asking how they could help. Friends inundated her with texts and calls, checking in to see if she was okay. While she appreciated the support, it all felt overwhelming. For years, she'd lived quietly, avoiding the spotlight that came with being the mayor's daughter. Now suddenly everyone seemed to care about her story. Ethan Brooks, a young journalist covering the protest for a local newspaper, became particularly interested in Maya's case. He'd been following the story closely since the video surfaced, sensing there was more to uncover beneath the surface. Determined to dig deeper, he spent hours poring over old police reports, interviewing residents, and attending community meetings. Slowly but surely, patterns began to emerge. Patterns that painted a disturbing picture of systemic bias within the department. One evening, while reviewing documents at the library, Ethan stumbled upon something significant, a series of complaints filed against officers Ryan and Clark dating back several years. Each complaint described eerily similar scenarios where the officers allegedly harassed or mistreated black individuals without cause. Most of these cases had been dismissed due to lack of evidence, but taken together, they formed a damning narrative. Excited by his discovery, Ethan reached out to Samantha Lewis, a former officer turned whistleblower. Samantha had left the force years ago after witnessing rampant misconduct firsthand. Reluctant at first, she eventually agreed to meet with Ethan, bringing along files she'd secretly collected during her time on the job. Their collaboration proved invaluable. Together, they pieced together a timeline of corruption and cover-ups involving not only Ryan and Clark, but also higher-ranking officials within the department. The evidence was staggering and explosive. By the time Ethan published his exposé, the city was already buzzing with anticipation. His article laid bare decades of abuse and negligence, naming names and providing concrete examples of wrongdoing. Readers were shocked, outraged, and hungry for answers. Calls for accountability intensified, putting immense pressure on Mayor Dawson to act decisively. Despite the mounting scrutiny, Officer Ryan remained defiant. During a brief interview with a sympathetic reporter, he claimed he'd done nothing wrong and accused Maya of exaggerating the situation for attention. "She's using her daddy's position to stir up trouble," he sneered. "None of this would have blown up if she wasn't the mayor's kid." His comments sparked widespread condemnation, further fueling public anger. Protest organizers seized the opportunity, organizing a massive rally outside City Hall. Thousands of people showed up, united in their demand for justice. Among them was Maya, standing tall and resolute as speakers took turns addressing the crowd. When it was her turn to speak, Maya stepped up to the microphone, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "What happened to me wasn't an isolated incident," she began, scanning the sea of faces before her. "It's part of a pattern of racism, bias, and abuse that has gone unchecked for far too long. We deserve better. Our communities deserve better." Her words resonated deeply, earning thunderous applause. As she stepped away from the podium, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about creating lasting change for everyone who had ever been treated unfairly because of the color of their skin. Though the road ahead promised to be long and challenging, Maya knew she wasn't alone. She had allies, supporters, and a growing movement behind her. And perhaps most importantly, she had hope. A belief that things could and would get better, no matter how hard the fight might be. The press conference was set to begin at noon, but long before then, the auditorium at City Hall was already packed. Journalists jostled for position near the front, their cameras ready to capture every word. Activists held signs reading, "Accountability," "Now," and "End Systemic Racism," while members of the public filled the rows, eager to hear what Maya Johnson had to say. The air buzzed with anticipation, a mix of hope and tension that seemed to hang over everyone like a cloud. Maya stood backstage, taking slow, steady breaths. She wasn't used to being in the spotlight like this. For most of her life, she'd preferred staying out of the public eye, letting her father handle the politics and media attention. But this time was different. This wasn't just about her, it was about all the people who had faced similar injustices and never gotten the chance to tell their stories. She knew she couldn't stay silent anymore. Her father, Mayor Richard Dawson, stood beside her, offering quiet words of encouragement. "You've got this, Maya," he said softly, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Just speak from your heart." She nodded, grateful for his support, but also aware that this moment belonged to her. As the clock struck 12, an assistant signaled it was time. With one last deep breath, Maya stepped out onto the stage. The room fell silent as she approached the podium. Flashbulbs popped, illuminating her face in brief bursts of light. She adjusted the microphone slightly, ensuring it was at the right height, then looked out at the sea of faces before her. Some were familiar, friends, colleagues, activists she'd met during recent protests, but many were strangers. Strangers who had come to listen, to learn, and to demand change. "Thank you all for being here today," she began, her voice strong and clear despite the nerves swirling inside her. "I didn't plan to be standing here in front of you. I didn't ask for any of this. But sometimes life forces us into moments we can't ignore, moments where we have to stand up and say, 'Enough.'" A murmur rippled through the crowd, followed by applause. Maya paused, letting the energy settle, before continuing. "What happened to me in the park wasn't unique, it wasn't rare. It happens every day to black men, women, and children across this country. We are profiled, harassed, and treated as if we don't belong simply because of the color of our skin. And too often, no one holds those responsible accountable." Her words hit hard, resonating deeply with the audience. People nodded in agreement, some wiping away tears, others clenching their fists in frustration. Maya's tone remained measured, but there was a fire in her eyes that couldn't be ignored. "I'm not here to shame anyone or point fingers," she continued. "I'm here because I believe in a better future, a future where everyone, regardless of race, feels safe in their own community, where parents don't have to teach their children how to behave around police officers just to keep them alive, where justice isn't a privilege reserved for the few, but a right afforded to all." The crowd erupted in cheers, drowning out her next few sentences. Maya waited patiently for the noise to subside, her lips curling into a small smile. When the applause finally died down, she pressed on. "But achieving that future won't be easy. It will require more than hashtags or speeches. It will take real action. Action from our leaders, our institutions, and each and every one of us. My father has promised reforms within the police department, and I believe him when he says he's committed to making meaningful change. But promises aren't enough. We need transparency, accountability, and most importantly, we need trust." As she spoke, cameras captured her every move, broadcasting her message live to millions of viewers across the nation. Social media platforms lit up with reactions, hashtags like Cheer Speak Up Like Maya trending almost instantly. People praised her courage, calling her a role model for young activists everywhere. Even critics of her father's administration found themselves moved by her sincerity and conviction. Backstage, Ethan Brooks watched the speech unfold on a monitor, scribbling notes furiously in his notebook. He'd been following Maya's story closely since the incident in the park, and now seeing her step into her own as a leader, he felt inspired. After the press conference ended, he approached her cautiously, introducing himself as the journalist who had written the exposé on police misconduct. "I wanted to thank you," he said earnestly. "Your bravery gave me the courage to dig deeper into this story. Without you, none of this would have been possible." Maya smiled warmly, shaking his hand. "Thank you," she replied. "If we're going to create real change, we need people like you, people willing to shine a light on the truth no matter how uncomfortable it might be." Their conversation was cut short as another wave of reporters descended upon Maya, eager for sound bites and quotes. Ethan stepped back, content, to observe from a distance. Watching her navigate the chaos with grace and poise, he realized something important. Maya wasn't just a victim of injustice, she was becoming a force for change. Inspired by her example, Ethan decided to shift his focus. Instead of merely reporting on the protests and scandals, he began working on a series of articles highlighting grassroots efforts to combat systemic racism. He interviewed activists, educators, and everyday citizens who were doing their part to build a fairer society. His pieces gained traction quickly, earning praise for their balanced yet passionate approach. Meanwhile, Mayor Dawson wasted no time implementing the reforms he'd promised. Within days of Maya's press conference, he announced sweeping changes to the city's policing policies. Mandatory anti-bias training became a requirement for all officers, while body cameras were distributed to ensure greater transparency. A civilian oversight board was established to review complaints against law enforcement, giving ordinary citizens a voice in holding officers accountable. Not everyone welcomed these changes. Some members of the police union pushed back fiercely, claiming the reforms undermined their ability to do their jobs effectively. Anonymous threats poured in, targeting both the mayor and his family. Security measures were tightened around the Dawson household, with private guards stationed outside their home 24/7. Despite the danger, Maya refused to let fear dictate her actions. If anything, the backlash only strengthened her resolve. She threw herself into advocacy work, founding an organization called Voices for Equity. Its mission was simple yet ambitious: empower marginalized communities and hold institutions accountable for perpetuating inequality. Through workshops, town halls, and partnerships with local nonprofits, Maya worked tirelessly to amplify the voices of those often ignored or silenced. Her efforts didn't go unnoticed. Civil rights leaders from across the country reached out, offering guidance and support. Prominent figures like Reverend Angela Monroe, a longtime champion of racial justice, praised Maya's leadership, calling her a beacon of hope in dark times. Together, they organized rallies, fundraisers, and educational campaigns aimed at dismantling systemic racism piece by piece. Even within the police department, cracks began to form in the wall of resistance. Detective Laura Bennett, who had initially come forward with evidence against officers Ryan and Clark, became a vocal advocate for reform. She joined forces with other officers disillusioned by the status quo, forming a coalition dedicated to improving relations between law enforcement and the communities they served. "We can't keep doing things the same way and expect different results," Laura told a reporter during an interview. "Real change starts with us, admitting our mistakes, learning from them, and committing to doing better." Her words resonated with many, sparking internal discussions about accountability and ethics. While progress was slow, there were glimmers of hope. Young recruits entering the academy expressed a desire to serve with integrity, inspired by the growing movement for justice. As weeks turned into months, the momentum continued to build. Protests evolved into community dialogues where residents and police officers sat down together to share their experiences and concerns. Schools incorporated lessons on diversity and inclusion into their curriculums, teaching students the importance of empathy and understanding. Businesses pledged to hire more inclusively, recognizing the value of representation in every industry. Through it all, Maya remained a constant presence, guiding the movement with wisdom beyond her years. Though she knew the road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, she never lost sight of her ultimate goal: a world where everyone could live freely and safely, regardless of the color of their skin. And so, amidst the trials and triumphs, Maya found solace in the knowledge that she was part of something bigger than herself, something worth fighting for. The trial began on a chilly autumn morning, the kind of day where the air felt crisp and sharp against your skin. Outside the courthouse, crowds had gathered early, holding signs and chanting slogans demanding accountability. Inside, the atmosphere was quieter but no less charged. Every seat in the gallery was filled. Reporters scribbled furiously into notebooks, activists leaned forward eagerly, and ordinary citizens sat quietly, their eyes fixed on the front of the room. This wasn't just another court case. It was a reckoning. Maya Johnson entered the courtroom flanked by her father, Mayor Richard Dawson, and her lawyer, a seasoned civil rights attorney named Karen Miller. Maya looked composed, her posture straight and her gaze steady, but those who knew her well could see the faint tension in her jaw. She had prepared for this day for weeks, rehearsing her testimony and steeling herself for whatever might come. Still, nothing could fully prepare her for the reality of facing officers Ryan and Clark again, the men who had treated her with such disdain in the park that fateful afternoon. As the proceedings got underway, the judge instructed everyone to Horace. Judge Evelyn Harper, known for her fairness and no-nonsense demeanor, presided over the case. Her presence commanded respect, and when she spoke, the courtroom fell silent. "This is a serious matter," she said firmly. "I expect all parties involved to conduct themselves appropriately." Once the formalities were out of the way, the prosecution presented its opening statement. They outlined the events of that day in the park, emphasizing how officers Ryan and Clark had singled out Maya based solely on racial bias. The defense countered by arguing that the officers were simply doing their jobs, following standard protocol, and that Maya's status as the mayor's daughter had unfairly amplified the situation. For days, witnesses took the stand. Some recounted seeing the incident firsthand, describing how aggressive and unwarranted the officer's behavior had been. Others spoke about broader patterns of misconduct within the department, pointing to years of unchecked discrimination. Detective Laura Bennett testified about the complaints filed against Ryan and Clark, her voice steady despite the hostile glares coming from the defendant's side of the room. But the most anticipated moment came when Maya herself was called to testify. As she walked to the witness stand, the entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. She swore to tell the truth, then turned to face the prosecutor, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Ms. Johnson," the prosecutor began gently, "can you please describe what happened on the day in question?" Maya nodded, her voice calm, but carrying a quiet strength as she recounted the details. She spoke about sitting peacefully in the park reading her book when the two officers approached her. She described how they accused her of loitering without cause, how their tone shifted from questioning to outright hostility when she asked why she was being targeted. When she reached the part where they threatened to arrest her, her voice faltered, briefly, but only for a moment. She quickly regained her composure, refusing to let emotion overshadow her words. "And how did you feel during this encounter?" the prosecutor asked. Maya hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "I felt humiliated," she admitted, "not because of anything I had done, but because of how they treated me, as if I didn't belong there, as if my existence alone was suspicious. And I wasn't scared just for myself. I thought about all the other Black people who've been treated the same way, or worse, and haven't had the platform or support to speak up." Her response drew murmurs from the gallery, forcing the judge to call for order. Across the room, officers Ryan and Clark exchanged uneasy glances, their confidence visibly shaken. When it was the defense's turn to cross-examine her, they tried to paint Maya as someone seeking attention, implying that she had provoked the confrontation to further her father's political agenda. But Maya remained unshaken. "If I wanted attention," she shot back calmly, "there are easier ways to get it. What I want is justice, not just for me, but for everyone who has faced similar treatment." By the time Maya stepped down from the witness stand, the tide had shifted noticeably. Even some of the jurors exchanged glances, their expressions suggesting they were grappling with the weight of what they'd heard. Outside the courtroom, news outlets broadcast snippets of her testimony, amplifying the growing public outcry. The trial progressed. More evidence emerged thanks to Ethan Brooks and Samantha Lewis. Their investigation had uncovered a trail of misconduct stretching back decades, implicating not only Ryan and Clark but also several high-ranking officials within the police department. Documents showing ignored complaints, falsified reports, and deliberate cover-ups were presented to the court, leaving little room for doubt about the systemic nature of the problem. The defense fought hard to discredit the evidence, claiming it was circumstantial or taken out of context. But the sheer volume of proof overwhelmed their arguments. By the final day of the trial, even some of the officers' staunchest supporters began to distance themselves, sensing the inevitability of a guilty verdict. Closing arguments brought the tension to a fever pitch. The prosecution painted a vivid picture of institutional racism, urging the jury to recognize the broader implications of their decision. "This isn't just about two officers," the lead prosecutor declared passionately. "It's about sending a message that no one is above accountability, not today, not ever." The defense, meanwhile, made a last-ditch effort to appeal to the jury's sense of fairness, insisting that punishing Ryan and Clark would be unjust given the pressures of their job. But their pleas fell flat in the face of overwhelming evidence. After hours of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict: guilty on all counts. Gasps rippled through the courtroom as the foreman read the decision aloud. Officers Ryan and Clark stared ahead blankly, their faces pale with disbelief. For Maya and her supporters, however, it was a moment of vindication, a small but significant victory in the larger fight for justice. Outside the courthouse, cheers erupted as news of the verdict spread. Protesters celebrated, hugging one another and chanting slogans like, "Accountability wins," and "Justice prevails." Maya stood on the steps alongside her father, addressing the crowd with gratitude and resolve. "This verdict doesn't mean the work is done," she said firmly. "It means we've taken one step forward. There are still systems to dismantle, hearts to change, and lives to protect. So let's keep going, together." Her words echoed across the plaza, fueling the determination of everyone present. Though challenges lay ahead, the momentum of the movement showed no signs of slowing. Maya had become a symbol of hope, proving that courage and persistence could spark real change even in the face of entrenched injustice. The guilty verdict sent shockwaves through the city, sparking celebrations and renewed determination among those fighting for justice. For many, it felt like a turning point, a rare instance where accountability had been achieved despite the odds. But Maya Johnson knew better than anyone that this was only one step in a much longer journey. True change wouldn't happen overnight. It would take sustained effort, collaboration, and unwavering commitment to dismantle the systems of inequality that had persisted for generations. In the weeks following the trial, life began to settle into a new rhythm. Officers Ryan and Clark were sentenced to prison terms, their careers over and their reputations tarnished. While some viewed the punishment as harsh, others argued it wasn't enough to undo decades of harm caused by similar acts of misconduct. Regardless, the verdict served as a clear message. No one, not even those sworn to protect and serve, was above the law. Maya threw herself into her advocacy work with renewed energy. Voices for Equity, the organization she founded, grew rapidly, attracting volunteers and donors from across the country. Together, they launched programs aimed at educating communities about systemic racism, empowering marginalized voices, and fostering dialogue between citizens and law enforcement. Workshops were held in schools, churches, and community centers, encouraging open conversations about privilege, bias, and allyship. One of the most impactful initiatives was a mentorship program designed to connect young activists with seasoned leaders in social justice movements. Through this program, Maya met Ethan Brooks again. Since his initial exposé, Ethan had left journalism to pursue a career in public policy, inspired by the courage he'd witnessed during the protests and trial. He brought fresh ideas and a deep understanding of grassroots organizing, quickly becoming one of Maya's closest collaborators. Together, Maya and Ethan worked tirelessly to keep the momentum going. They traveled to other cities, sharing their experiences and strategies with local activists. Everywhere they went, they found people eager to learn and contribute. From small towns to major metropolitan areas, the movement gained traction, proving that the fight for justice transcended geographical boundaries. Back home, Mayor Richard Dawson continued pushing for reforms within the police department. Mandatory anti-bias training became a cornerstone of officer development, while body cameras ensured transparency in interactions with the public. The Civilian Oversight Board, once dismissed as unnecessary, proved invaluable in addressing complaints fairly and impartially. Slowly but surely, trust between the community and law enforcement began to rebuild. Not everyone welcomed these changes. Some members of the police union remained resistant, claiming the reforms hindered their ability to do their jobs effectively. Anonymous threats against Maya and her family persisted, though security measures kept them safe. Despite the backlash, Maya refused to let fear dictate her actions. If anything, the resistance only strengthened her resolve. Detective Laura Bennett played a crucial role in bridging the gap between reformers and skeptics within the department. She organized meetings where officers could voice their concerns, while also learning about the importance of accountability and empathy. Her efforts earned her both praise and criticism, but she stood firm in her belief that real change started from within. As the months passed, the city transformed in subtle yet significant ways. Community dialogues replaced protests, bringing residents and police officers together to share their stories and perspectives. Schools incorporated lessons on diversity and inclusion into their curriculums, teaching students the value of respecting differences. Businesses pledged to hire more inclusively, recognizing the importance of representation in every industry. Even ordinary citizens found ways to contribute. Neighbors organized neighborhood cleanups, ensuring shared spaces reflected the values of equity and care. Artists painted murals celebrating diversity, turning blank walls into vibrant reminders of unity. Social media campaigns encourage people to support Black-owned businesses, amplifying economic opportunities for marginalized communities. For Maya, these small victories added up to something bigger, a cultural shift toward fairness and understanding. Though challenges remained, she took solace in knowing that progress was possible when people worked together. One evening, as she walked through the park where it all began, she paused to reflect on how far she'd come. The bench where she'd been harassed now sat empty, bathed in the golden light of the setting sun. Children laughed nearby, chasing each other around the playground. Families enjoyed picnics on the grass, their laughter mingling with the rustle of leaves in the breeze. It was a stark contrast to the tension and hostility of that summer afternoon, months ago. Maya smiled softly, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't known in a long time. This park, once a symbol of injustice, had become a testament to resilience and hope. As she turned to leave, she noticed someone approaching her. A young girl, no older than 10, clutching a handmade sign that read, "Thank you." "Are you Maya?" the girl asked shyly, her eyes wide with admiration. Maya knelt down to meet her gaze. "Yes, I am," she replied warmly. "What's your name?" "I'm Zoe," the girl said, holding out the sign. "My mom told me what you did. She said you're helping make the world better." Touched by the gesture, Maya accepted the sign, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Thank you, Zoe," she said softly. "And tell your mom thank you too. We're all doing this together." As Zoe ran back to her mother, Maya stood there for a moment longer, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky glowed orange and pink, casting a warm light over everything. It was a reminder that even after the darkest storms, there was always the promise of brighter days ahead. That night, Maya returned home to find her father waiting for her in the living room. He looked up from his book as she entered, smiling, faintly. "How was the park?" he asked. "It was beautiful," she replied, sinking into the couch beside him. "Everything feels different now, like we're actually making a difference." Richard nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You know, I used to think change happened because of big speeches or grand gestures. But seeing everything you've done, the workshops, the partnerships, the conversations, it's taught me that real change happens quietly, one person at a time." Maya leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling a rare sense of contentment. "We still have a long way to go," she admitted, "but we're moving forward. That's what matters." Outside, the city buzzed with life, its streets alive with possibility. Somewhere in the distance, music drifted through the air, blending with the hum of traffic and laughter. It was a sound of hope, a melody of progress powered by the collective strength of countless individuals working toward a common goal. And as Maya sat there with her father, she allowed herself to dream of a future where no one would have to endure what she had. A future where equality wasn't just an ideal but a reality. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't happen overnight. But with every step forward, with every voice raised in solidarity, that future felt closer than ever before.